And good morning and welcome back to Wake Up America. I'm Bob Sellers here with Mike Carter. Well, former President Donald Trump has been indicted on at least 7 federal charges, including illegal retention of classified documents, obstruction, as well as conspiracy.
And for more on what this could all mean for the former president, we are now joined by former acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker. Matt, good morning. Attorney General, good morning. What do you make of the news, and how high a bar will it be for prosecutors to get a conviction on these charges?
Yeah, good morning. It's good to be with you both. You know, this is obviously a sad day for America. It's unprecedented to have a former president charged federally. You know, we crossed a Rubicon when he was charged in New York several weeks ago now. And, you know, I think this case is going to be more complex than it might seem on the face of it. I think there are several issues that, again, this prosecutor is taking a very aggressive posture on, and ultimately it's going to be up to this jury that's based in South Florida to decide, you know, whether or not these crimes have been committed by Donald Trump beyond a reasonable doubt. But again, there's going to be a lot of twists and turns. I think the hardest thing is, as President Trump's running for president, is going to be working with his team, not only preparing for trial, but then carving out several weeks to be in the courthouse for a trial. So I don't know how quickly this is going to move through the system. Certainly politically, I think this, you know, obviously proves Donald Trump's point that he has been targeted with investigations and prosecutions at an unprecedented clip. And unfortunately, you know, it looks like this Department of Justice is just not going to give up until they, you know, believe they're going to get Trump.
Matt, you were acting Attorney General, so I'm kind of curious about the process and how much it can be exposed to political will. And when you're in that position, currently, that Merrick Garland obviously seems to be influencing what's going on. Is that what you think is going on here? And what's your feeling about that? Because you've been in that position before.
Well, Merrick Garland put in his hand-picked special counsel to handle this investigation. And obviously, in the case of Joe Biden, he put his hand-picked special prosecutor in that seat as well. And it was intentional who he picked and their, you know, reputations. You know, at the same time, the special counsel regulation does not remove the attorney general from the process. And a lot of it matters who's in the chair. You know, if you remember when I was the U.S. Attorney General, you know, we did things by the law. We followed, you know, tradition and protocol, and we, you know, did not put our thumbs on the scale of investigations and didn't politically influence them. I can't say the same for Merrick Garland. He appears to be very much willing to do the bidding of the Biden White House, and unfortunately, I think has weaponized the Department of Justice beyond what was ever imaginable.
Matt, I think a lot of folks are wondering this morning, what is the difference between what Donald Trump did with classified documents and what Joe Biden did with classified documents? Why is one being federally charged and not the other?
Yeah, Mike, I think that's a great question. Remember, we haven't seen the indictment. We've heard the president's lawyers talk about what's in the indictment. But, you know, the distinction between the cases is, on one hand, they're very similar cases. On the other hand, you know, Donald Trump's case, I think, is stronger for President Trump than Joe Biden's case, because as president, Donald Trump could have declassified these documents. Certainly, they're considered presidential records. In the case of then Vice President Biden, none of those arguments would apply. But, you know, the only card that Joe Biden has to play right now is a DOJ policy that you can't indict a sitting president. And so that's, I think, one of the only differences as we sit here today as to why they're proceeding with Donald Trump and why we haven't heard a peep out of Rob Hur and the Joe Biden investigation.
Obviously, we've got the campaign going on for 2024, and now you have these charges. Can you give us a feel for the timeline here and how those might clash?
Yeah, so the judge in this case, whoever's assigned, is going to know that not only is there a presidential race going on and be very sensitive to President Trump's rights and First Amendment privileges under the U.S. Constitution. At the same time, that judge is also going to know that there's another matter pending in New York Manhattan District Court, and also potentially charges coming out of Georgia, although we don't know much about the timing and if those charges are coming. So, a judge is going to have to navigate all of that in each particular case. And so I think it's going to be a slow train. Obviously, President Trump is going to need to continue to campaign and travel the country. He's got a very busy weekend, I know, this weekend in Georgia and North Carolina. So I think I wouldn't expect speedy trials and anything suddenly happening in the coming months. But I think 2024, and especially as we turn the calendar to 2025, it could be a very busy trial calendar for the Trump defense team and the prosecutors.
We already know that the New York indictment will be taking place. Donald Trump expected to be in court for the New York indictment during the primary season next year. If this is a second case that he'll have to attend and be in the courtroom for during an election year, you got to wonder what that means. Matt Whitaker, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
All right, Mike and Bob, good to see you guys.